We see that very clearly at the very beginning when suffering entered into the human race. If you'll go back here for a moment, I will try to keep this brief and concise so that we can get through this lesson this morning. But go back to Genesis chapter 3. Prior to Genesis chapter 3, there was no pain, there was no death, and there was no suffering. But in Genesis chapter 3 and verse 1, now the serpent, I want you to understand that is Satan, was more crafty than any other beast of the field that the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, did God actually say to you, you shall not eat of the tree of the garden? And the woman said to the serpent, we may eat of the fruit of the trees in the garden, but God said you shall not eat of the fruit of the tree that is in the midst of the garden. There's a specific tree. He says, neither shall you touch it lest you die. This is Eve. She's in a conversation with Satan. Satan is laying the groundwork to tempt her. And here we find out that Eve knows exactly what God said. There is no doubt that the scriptures do not leave us to believe that she was ignorant of what God said. Therefore, she made a conscious decision. Drop down with me to verse 16. She made a conscious decision, actually not 16, let's go a little bit farther here. Let's go ahead and drop down to verse 6, I'm sorry. So when the woman saw the tree was good for food, this is the forbidden tree, mind you, the one that she just told Satan, God said that we can't eat of it or even touch it. So when the woman saw the tree was good for food, and it was a delight to the eyes, and the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate it. And she gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate. Now see, here is a decision based on the free will of the human being that was made that is going to lead to pain and suffering. Look at the punishment for this. We realize God told them ahead of time what the punishment was. The punishment was death. What God did not tell them was that the death would not come immediately. God says in verse 15, I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your offspring and her offspring. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. To the woman he said, I will surely multiply your pain in childbearing. We've got mothers in here who have been through childbirth. And we've had fathers who have survived as well. It's not pleasant. And I wouldn't trade places with my wife for anything. But I'll tell you what, there is also a feeling of helplessness when you see your wife in that situation. Part of the human punishment. He says, in pain you shall bring forth children, and your desire shall be contrary to your husband, but he shall rule over you. And to Adam he said, because you have listened to the voice of your wife, and you have eaten of the tree of which I commanded you, you shall not eat of it. Cursed be the ground because of you. In pain, you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread, till you return to the ground. For out of it you were taken. For you are dust, and to dust you will return. Okay, so we see that some pain and suffering is a result of personal choices. Look very quickly at Romans chapter 5 and see what the Apostle Paul says in Romans chapter 5 and in verse 12. Romans chapter 5, verse 12, the Apostle Paul says, therefore, just as sin came into the world through one man, and death through sin, or as a result of sin, so death spread to all men, because all sinned. For sin indeed was in the world before the law was given, but sin is not counted where there is no law. Yet death reigned from Adam to Moses, even over those whose sinning was not like the transgression of Adam, who was a type of the one who was to come. Death reigned from Adam until the present day. Death has reigned as a result of sin. And the Apostle Paul says that all mankind has sinned. So when we think and ask ourselves why God would allow bad things to happen to good people, we need to understand that our definition of good and God's definition of good are really quite different things. We see good people, and I like to look for the good in people. I believe it's positive thinking. But we need to also realize that even good people sin and fall short of the glory of God. Romans 3 and verse 23, the Apostle Paul says, For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. So we understand that all of us sin and we make bad choices. Secondly, because God set the universe in a certain order, there are some things that happen by chance. Okay. For example, I mentioned your car ride here this morning. Well, it was several years ago now. It doesn't seem like it, but time has a way of slipping by. But it was several years ago that, my brother went out to brush hog a field, something he did on a regular basis. He went out to brush hog. My sister went to pick him up and found the tractor had rolled, and my brother had been crushed and was dead. Sometimes things happen by chance. I believe that was one of those things that happened by chance, because the laws of gravity are set in place. I know my brother. I know him pretty well. And I suspect and anticipate that the day was beginning to slip away and the field was almost done. He'd saved the worst of the field for the very end. And he was probably in a hurry, knowing that my sister would be there at 4 o'clock to pick him up to go milk the cows and do chores. My anticipation is he was probably going a little faster than what was safe. And the front wheels of the tractor hit a rut, and it turned over. I consider that to be an accident. We call them accidents because we don't anticipate them. But they happen just the same. But they are based upon universal principles, such as gravity, such as motion. Those things cause accidents based on how the universe works.